If you don't want to be featured on our recording, you can go ahead and turn your camera off, but we love to see faces, so you are welcome to keep your camera on. So with that, we're going to go ahead and press the record button. All right.
I already pressed it, sorry.
No, you're fine. Thank you so much, Michael. And with that, let's go ahead and kick it over to Library Services so they can introduce themselves.
Okay, so hello everyone. I think everyone here knows most of our team at this point. I don't know if Melissa was able to make it, or actually I don't see Leanne either. But I'm Michael Doge from Library Services. I'm the library coordinator for Queens. Leanne, who I'm sure will make it. Oh, Leanne's here. Leanne can introduce herself in a moment. And Melissa is the director of Library Services. Should we do our little introduction now of what we just wanted to talk about, Laura?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this really brief.
No. I'm off. Of course, I'm pressing stuff and it's like, sorry.
Okay. No problem. So really quick announcements from our team. We're working also with DIIT on a Wix PD. They're launching a new platform for website development for students. That's step-by-step. You don't need to know coding. You don't need to know website development. We're hosting that on Thursday. It's on our PD calendar. It's on DIIT's PD calendar. Please do come. And our really big announcement is that just today we learned that Discovery Ed is free for the DOE, at least through June. And there is free access available. I'm posting it all over social media. I posted it to the listserv, which I think most of you are on. Please take those posts and share them and reshare them. It's an incredible resource for the DOE. We're going to have PD coming out in roughly 2 weeks. We're still scheduling it, so I can't guarantee it, but we're working on it. But access is available right now, and we know many teachers love Discovery Ed and they just thrive on the videos, and we know that content is needed more now than ever. So please do access it, and if you need to wait for PD, wait for PD. But if you're comfortable trying out new tools or just need a library of video content or even curriculum, they have it. With that, oh, Leanne, sorry, I didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Leanne Ellis with the Office of Library Services and the Manhattan Coordinator.
Sorry about that. I'm just so excited about the Discovery Ed thing. Okay, so we want to thank our partners in DIIT, Laura Gondo, Lisa Nielsen, for working on the session with us. We're really excited to bring it to you. We really hope it'll bring an ongoing source of learning for you on a weekly basis with topics that you choose. So thank you for coming. And with that, I'll kick it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Michael. So our team is the Office of Digital Literacy and Inclusion at DIIT. My name's Laura Ogando. I'm the program manager for the team. I've been with the DOE now for 11 school years. I started out as a special educator in self-contained. I also have worked in the ICT setting. And most recently, before this position that I currently hold, I was my school's digital literacy specialist working in the media center. So I feel very much a kinship with my fellow librarians who are here today. My background, as you can kind of see, is in special education. It's in technology integration, and now most recently, digital accessibility and literacy. So I'm super excited to be here with all of you today. I'm going to pass it over to Lisa Nielsen to introduce herself.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Leanne. We're just really happy to be able to bring this series to you. We think it's going to be a great way for librarians to connect every week. So there will be some networking time built in, and also you have the chat for that. And we just have a large catalog of classes that we're excited to share with you. And also, like Laura, prior to this, I served as a librarian and all sorts of different things in digital literacy, digital citizenship, digital inclusion. And we love partnering with library services. So thank you for being here. And I'll turn it back over to you, Laura, to tell how we're doing the back channel and kicked off.
Absolutely. So I do want to make mention, we have our colleague Latikwa Spivey. She's our awesome assistant and she is on the back end. So she's been posting in the chat some of the important links that you're going to see here today. So I just want to call attention to that. I cannot do what I do without a little help on the back end of things, as I'm sure you all probably feel the same way. You're utilizing possibly student teachers, paraprofessionals, maybe even students as well to kind of help you with that. And we will absolutely talk through some of those techniques as we head into today's session. So just want to make sure that you all know that we want to get you the support you need. And part of that will be through our back channel in the chat. So Latikwa has gone ahead and reposted those links for today. You have our agenda and everything is linked in the agenda. We're huge on agendas on our team because it's a one kind of stop shop, everything you need. I also want to call attention to our learning calendar. Our team, I know Library Services has their own, but our team has one as well. So if you're looking to get more support, particularly around topics like digital literacy and inclusion, I highly encourage you to check that out. Bookmark it, as we are always adding classes to it. A couple of other links that you see in the chat as well. We've got our webinar workbook. That's a note-taking document. If you feel like that's helpful for you, you're welcome to use it. We don't collect notes. We're not requiring it for anything, but we just know some folks like to use a note-taking document. And then we are encouraging folks to join our webmaster team. We know that a lot of librarians serve as their school's webmaster, or if not in official capacity, they do support websites at the school level. So that's a helpful team to be part of. And if you're not already, we encourage you to do so. All right here. Ooh. So as Michael said, we're going to be doing these weekly. So this is the first one, but not the last one. And if you have a colleague that was bummed out, they couldn't make it today, no worries. We're going to be doing this again every single week. As I said, or as Michael said, being receptive to the topics that you need support in, topics that you want to hear about. So with that, today's session is all about hybrid teaching. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And we're in the thick of it, right? We're already using hybrid teaching. So why are we here, right? Well, we're trying to up our practice. This is a model that's being used currently. We know that depending on your level, so to speak, you may be fully remote. So obviously our middle and our high school teachers are remote only at this point, but we know that this is probably not going to last the entire school year. Eventually they will hopefully bring us back once, we kind of get over this peak and surge in COVID cases. We know that the system will probably return to full hybrid. So we need to address that. We need to address what this looks like. How are we still supporting our remote only teachers? Because we know that they also have to work with the hybrid teachers, and we have to address the challenges that arise because of this, right? This is not easy work, and we do want to be transparent in acknowledging that. So these are all things that we're going to address today. So our agenda and kind of the topics that we're going to discuss. We're going to talk through what some effective strategies for hybrid teaching are. We're going to call out some of those challenges because, again, we can't ignore that this is not the same as face-to-face and in-person learning. There are some unique challenges, and being able to kind of be aware of what those challenges are will help us better tackle them. We also cannot talk about any type of teaching and learning this year without talking about social and emotional learning. That has been a huge focus, especially this school year, and our chancellor has made that clear, but also because, so many things are happening right now. This is tough on so many levels for both our students and for us as educators. So we want to make sure we talk through some of that SEL piece of things. We're going to talk through some strategies for success. We're going to go over a few tools, specifically today looking at Nearpod. So if you haven't seen Nearpod, you're in for a treat on that front. Then we'll wrap up with a quick summary of just kind of the big key takeaways, and then we'll end with those questions, sharing, and reflection time. So let's talk through some expected outcomes of hybrid teaching, right? What are we trying to accomplish? And it's not all that different from in-person teaching, right? When we're talking about hybrid teaching, we still need to focus on developing positive relationships between teachers and students, and also between teachers and teachers. This is an all hands on deck, right? And you know right now that you are having to collaborate with so many individuals. I always feel like as the librarian, you are somewhat of a hub of information, right? And you are supporting not only the students that you support, but also the teachers who are coming to you for so many resources. So it's important that we're building those positive relationships. We also need to think about engagement, right? That's one of those key terms that keeps being thrown around. But how do we ensure that students are engaged and learning both at home and in school, right? I think the home piece is where it's super challenging because we're not able to kind of always check in. We don't know if they're really there, especially if they don't have their camera on. So we kind of need to make sure that we are addressing that engagement piece in all the lessons we design. We also need to tackle how we're ensuring that our remote only students are learning at the same pace as our in person learners. And again, this is looking a little different right now because we know that elementary is at this point the only, I should say elementary and D75, they're the only ones that are in person at the moment. The rest of our system is fully remote, but we still need to think through that pacing piece. And we also want to make sure that there is a seamless transition between remote learning and in-person learning. And that has probably been the biggest challenge so far for a lot of folks, especially as some schools that are in person have to quickly transition into remote because of maybe positive cases. And so that's going to happen. That's again one of the challenges of this year is being able to go kind of remote on a dime and then switch back and go back to in person. So we're going to talk about all these things as we discuss hybrid teaching. So we know that there are various models, and depending on what made sense for your school, you picked between one of 5 proposed models, or if your school was feeling like those models just didn't support what the needs for your community were, schools could have designed their own. But most schools picked one of the 5. And on average, we're talking students are in person 1/3 to 1/2 of the time. And when I say in person, again, physically in the building, the rest of the time being remote. In 1 second here, getting the spinny wheel of death. Those of you who have a Mac know. All right, so really quick, I'd like to check in with folks and feel free to use the chat to let us know, but which model did your school select? Now, again, I know that this is a bit odd because our middle and high schools are, even though you may have picked a particular model, we know that you're fully remote right now, but which model did you happen to pick? Again, Model 1 and 2, as you see on my screen, are geared for all of the elementary, middle, and high schools. Model 3 is available only to middle and high school. And then we know that models 4 and 5 were specifically for D75. We also know that schools had the option of designing their own. So if that was you, certainly feel free to put that in the chat. But I see we've got okay. Oh, and it looks like Model 2 is very popular. All right, and we've got a Model 5. Okay. And I see some folks are saying you started with one model and then transitioned to another. I also know that for some of our elementary schools, they're really pushing, 5 in-person days a week. So it'd be interesting to know if anyone's gotten there. We know that some schools have the capacity to do that and some schools don't, right? All right. And thank you to everyone who's responding in the chat. I see. Oh, and Nicole is saying we just started a 5-day group. Oh, interesting. I'm intrigued by the 5 days because from what I'm hearing, it's challenging to kind of set that up, right? Again, not every school has the capacity given, the constraints on how many kids you can have physically in a space, how many educators you have. We know that not every school is able to fully make the 5 days happen. So kudos to the schools who've been able to do it and figure it out. Because again, this is also so wackadoo, right? All right. So it looks like just scanning the chat, we've got a mix. We've got some folks who are attempting to do the 5 days. I know we've got several Model 1s, 2s. I even saw a 5. So something telling me we've got D75 in the house. Awesome. Now, the truth is, it doesn't matter which model you've picked, right? It doesn't change the approach. Just wanted to kind of see where we're at. But going along with this, what are your hopes and fears for hybrid teaching and learning? And especially now that we're essentially halfway through the year, right? We're almost at the end of January. Many of us have been doing this for a number of months. What has been, hopeful in these few months that we've been doing this? What has been the fear? And please, this is a safe space, so feel free to be honest. When I've taught this class before, I get some really honest feedback from teachers who are saying, "Yeah, this has been really great, but this fear of mine is coming true." Right? Not necessarily being able to check in with students every day, not seeing them every single day. That has been a fear that I've heard many teachers express and talk about, and it's okay, right? We have to be honest about these challenges, about the fact that this is not always ideal, right? I think for some students, they have really thrived in this space, and they have used it to really take their learning to the next level. But we also know that for all of our students who've thrived, there have been several who have floundered. So let's definitely be honest about that, right? Oh, and Joanna, thank you so much for sharing your comments. So for those who aren't in the chat, Joanna shared that she's feeling hopeful about how much the faculty has been able to identify the need for SEL. And I have to say that has absolutely been one of the hopeful feelings out of all of this. I think, social and emotional learning is not new. It's absolutely not new. And there has been research for quite a number of years highlighting the need to incorporate this more into teaching, right? But because of this pandemic and because of the unique challenges, SEL has been highlighted in a way that it hasn't been highlighted before. And people are really seeing the need to be more explicit with it, right? To make sure it is built into our lessons, to make sure that teachers get the PD and the support to be able to implement it effectively, right? So I'm right there with you. I'm hopeful that we continue that because it is so needed. Ooh, Joy, I love what you've shared. So rethinking how we reach out to large populations digitally. I agree. I think, again, because of this pandemic, we are now using tools that maybe weren't widely used. And yet here we are, we're using them and we're able to reach so much more. So that's definitely a hope of mine. Oh, awesome. I'm seeing what Kathleen is sharing. Third through fifth graders eager to engage in office hours and book clubs. I love that. But yeah, also fearful that they're falling behind. And we've heard this from a lot of educators, right? That our students may be falling behind. They're not necessarily progressing at the same pace. What I will say is that, remember, we designed the standards, right? We have decided, what progress should look like in any given school year, and we can make adjustments. And when I say we, I mean like as a collective body, like humans decided, and people decided what those skills were going to be. If we need to shift that, then we need to shift that. I think we get so locked into this is where kids need to be at a certain moment, and do understand that part of that is kind of arbitrary, right? So we need to kind of lessen that, because for all those folks saying like, oh, kids have fallen behind, the truth is, everyone's going through crises. No matter how hard you plan and work to try and get the content out there, some of our students, because of things that are happening, they're not ready for the content. So let's all like kind of give ourselves some breathing room, right? I'm just want to throw out there, thank you to the folks who are sharing their very valid fears and concerns. Teaching to the vacuum, right? Teaching to a bunch of black boxes. It's absolutely difficult to make those connections when you're not feeling actually connected, right? And I have felt that. I am a trainer and I train a lot of teachers. And I feel that of like, yeah, a lot of folks don't have their camera on. So I'm teaching to the void right there with you. And it's an odd experience, right? It's not necessarily the most fun. I see Michael turning his camera on. I'm here. But the truth is that this is difficult, right? And our students may be there and they may have, they're following along with you, but they may not always be on their camera, right? And that means something. It means something to be able to see a smiling face. And so, I didn't say any of this to make you guys turn your cameras on. I don't want you to think that, but to call out,
no, that's fine.
Right? It's just, we know that is challenging. And we also know that some of our students this entire school year will not turn a camera on, right? That's real. And they may not ever feel comfortable with that. I had a friend of mine share that her son refuses to turn the camera on. And she was like, I just want him to turn his camera on. And he finally had to open up and say, Mom, I'm a freshman in high school and I don't know any of these kids. And I don't feel comfortable. It's kind of this sense of protectiveness of I get to hide behind the black box. I don't know these kids like that. That's real. So put it in perspective. I love when folks turn their cameras on, but when you have the kid who doesn't turn it on, understand that there's probably more to it, right? So again, I just want to thank all of you for sharing. I'm looking through, I'm seeing folks talking about losing visibility in school, talking about the real fears, but also the good stuff that's coming. And we've made so many different just leaps and bounds of where we were before this pandemic. We've been able to use technology in ways that we weren't doing it before. We've got free subscriptions to things like Calm and Headspace, right? I see Michael posting about that. We've been able to embrace remote learning to kind of, do the things that maybe we couldn't do before, right? Because we were bound by tests and kind of some of those procedural things. And that stuff has gone by the wayside, right? So it's kind of, it goes both ways. There are definitely some great things that are happening and that give us hope as educators, but there's also some things that are definitely cause for concern, and we do want to address those head on. So with that, let's get into how we can plan to do some really great hybrid teaching, right? So when we're planning, we want to think about not just the academic needs, right? Always that's at the forefront. We want to make sure we're hitting the academic points, but let's prioritize social and emotional as well. And that needs to be, I think, woven in every single lesson that you do. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that, but that needs to be at the forefront. We also want to think about the other responsibilities of the students and who's at home to help them, right? We know that the minute students are at home and not physically in a building, it's a challenge in and of itself, right? Are they going to log in? What's happening at home? The dynamics at home are so different for every child, right? There might be issues with devices, and we've all been there, right? I think so many teachers have become one man and one woman tech support for their students. So, there might be a balance of devices. It might be that some students aren't fully independent. That, especially if you're at the elementary level or you're working with students in D75, they're not fully independent, which means that, if they're not signing in, it may not be because they don't want to. They may not have a grown up there to help them get in, right? So we need to kind of think through, what is home life for our students like? Because every child's home life situation is unique. We also need to build in time for students to actually learn the different online tools. And at this point in the year, they've probably learned most of them. And maybe, at this point, you're introducing one or two because you've launched a new unit or you've gotten access to something. But we do know that time needs to get spent on actually just showing students how to use the different tools, right? How to use the features of the webinar platform, right? Whether you're in Google Meet, you're in Zoom, you're in Teams, right? Or, if you're using a particular application like Jamboard or a Padlet, there's time that needs to get spent and just like telling students, this is how this thing works. This is how we're going to be using it. You also want to think through, what are the tools available and used by other teachers in your school? And this is going to be huge. Whenever we're talking about ed tech tools, especially when the pandemic first started, I think teachers were using everything under the sun, right? And the ed tech companies took note and everything became free, right? Every ed tech company issued a free license, a free this, a free that. And so we all got a taste of all these different tools. But at this point, especially now that we are into the middle of this kind of second year of pandemic teaching, we've got to tighten that up, because we shouldn't be using, just any type of ed tech tool ad nauseum, right? We got to be strategic and make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck and thinking through, what are other teachers using? Because if you're the one teacher that uses a particular tool, think about how much time you're going to spend having students learn that tool. And then they only use it with you. So kind of think through that. This is one of those times where getting on the same page school wide is really, really important. Because if every teacher's kind of going rogue and doing it on their own, that's a lot of different tools that you may be forcing your students to learn. And then they don't really get good at any of them, right? And if anything, you probably notice like, oh man, my students aren't checking in with this, or they're not using the Padlet, they're not using this. And it could just be they don't know how and they're overwhelmed. So be strategic and really think through what this looks like across your school. Also, let's be clear on what curriculum resources are available. Again, this should come from your school. This is, as per the U of T contract, you are supposed to be provided with a curriculum by your administration. So think through, what do those curriculum resources look like? Many things have been made digital over these past few months. So if you're using a particular curriculum, make sure that you've got the digital tools that go with it. A lot of companies have released those or made those available. So make sure you have them, because nothing's worse than you're planning for all of this and you're having to recreate a lot of stuff that actually already exists, right? That's doing double and triple work. And we're not trying to do that this year, right? Time is so valuable. So make sure you have the things you need, and then think through the time, right? And time, again, is so important to all of this. We want to be strategic as to when we're giving our live sessions, when we're having our lessons, and when we're providing some more asynchronous support. Now, I can't stress this enough, and I know I've already mentioned social and emotional learning, but we want to make sure that we are building this into everything we do. So a couple of things that you can do to address social emotional learning is, at the start of your sessions, make time for your students to chat informally, right? Make time for them to talk and just ask, like, how you doing? How's it going? Right? I always feel like, especially after a long weekend, things have happened. So today, when you've checked in with your students, have you built in that time to just chat? I know that sometimes we feel like, oh, I've got all this content to get through. I've got all these lessons, right? Time always feels like it's of the essence and we don't have enough of it. But this right here, as maybe non-critical as it seems, it actually is the most critical. right? That informal time that we give our students and ourselves to check in with each other. Things have been happening and you may not always know, right? And so having this informal time, it creates that sense of connectivity, right? It's also a way for students to get support. I will say we used to have them on Tuesdays, now we have them on Thursdays, but we have these teacher tech talks. And that's something that a lot of teachers have shared. They're like, I just make time for my kids to chat. And the stuff that comes out, right? And one of our educators shared that like a student actually said, mister, I haven't been coming to class because I've been a little depressed. I'm emotionally checked out. That's actually, I think it's beautiful that student shared that, right? That they felt safe enough because their teacher had made the time to value that informal chat, right? So don't discount or discredit those like just quick check-ins. I would really encourage all of you to start your classes that way. You can have it be more structured where maybe it's a round robin and every student gets a chance. Maybe it's more informal and it's popcorn and it's kind of whoever wants to jump in can jump in. But I would definitely recommend starting your classes with a check-in. It really makes a difference and it prioritizes that social and emotional learning. So what are some ways that you are addressing your students' SEL needs? What are things that you have tried? If you're seeing something in the chat, you can certainly give it a thumbs up or respond to someone. But I want us to kind of be able to share some of these strategies that we're using, because I feel like when we share, I get ideas of stuff. So I'd love to know, what are you doing to kind of check in with kids and really incorporate that SEL into your repertoire? And I'll give folks some time. Also, just transparent facilitation. You probably keep seeing me look towards this side. I teach with two computers or two devices. That's something we can talk through as well, but I'm always looking this way so that I can monitor the chat. So if you're wondering why I'm always looking off camera, that's why. And thank you to Michael, who shared a great team that the DOE has for mindfulness. That's definitely wonderful. If you can be part of more Microsoft teams, I know some folks get a little irritated. They're like, oh, really? Another team? But the truth is, right now, knowledge is power, right? And the more you can have at your fingertips in terms of resources and places to go to get answers and support, I think the better, right?
And the mindfulness group, the DOE does have a central team dedicated to mindfulness. And that's their group. And they share whatever they're doing to promote mindfulness in classrooms. And a lot of it's really good. So they don't post a lot. It's not overwhelming. So I just find it useful to pay attention to what they're doing and promoting.
I love it. Like I said, I can always use extra strategies when it comes to mindfulness.
And if we have an entire professional team dedicated to thinking about it, why not use them, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly how I feel. And also this stuff, like, let's also be honest. This stuff is not just for students. It's for us too, right? Like,
very true.
I think all of us at some point throughout this pandemic, we have struggled personally. I know I have. I'm not going to sit here and pretend or put on a brave face. To me, like, that's not putting on a brave face. That's actually kind of not being honest and true. This has been extremely hard in so many ways. There have been times where I feel isolated. Sometimes depending, there are days I don't leave my apartment. That's so odd, right? So it's important when we talk about SEL that we're not just thinking about it in terms of our students. Obviously, we want to think about our students, but we also need to think about ourselves too, right? We are included in this. So I'm just looking at the chat. Oh, and thank you so much. Joanna is sharing some resources. So thank you. It looks like she has a site that she's sharing with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, the more resources we have, the better. And Bia, yes, reminding folks that we are a community, right? I personally, that's why I've been pretty transparent with folks that I work with, and saying like, I'm struggling. You can say that to students. I mean, you don't need to like, delve into all the details, but I think it's powerful to say to your students, like, hey guys, like, I'm struggling too. Like, every day, is not rosy. Like, sometimes I'm having a hard time. We have to normalize the struggle, right? And I'm a big proponent in that, like normalizing the fact that it's okay to not be okay. And to say that, like, you don't have to get into details if you don't want to say why you're struggling, like, that's okay too. And even saying that to students, like, listen, you might not feel comfortable to give all the reasons, but to just say like, hey, I'm not having a good day. I'm like, today just feels harder. That is something we want to encourage, right? We want to encourage an honest and open dialogue. Oh, and I love that. Sophia's like sharing TED Talks, especially motivational ones. I love that. Um, Yep. And doing daily SEL check-ins. So, so important. Oh, and you're using Ruler. We used Ruler at my school. And I have to say, especially given what we're in right now with this pandemic, I think Ruler, the work that comes out of the Yale Emotional Center is amazing. If you don't know what Ruler is, you can do a quick Google search of it. But it does come to us from the Yale Emotional Center, headed, I believe, by Mark Brackett. And if you don't know him, he's definitely got a ton of YouTube videos. I suggest you check it out. It's all about regulating your emotions and having a way to talk about your emotions. And I think especially now, like, that is so key. And so many of our students don't have a way to talk about it. They don't know how to verbalize it. And so part of the work around Ruler is being able to kind of name your emotion, right? And it's like name it to tame it. So knowing when you're not feeling so great so that you can kind of identify it and then pick what you need to do to regulate and address the emotional response. So absolutely. And Joanna, don't worry. Listen, everyone always gets really afraid the minute they share sites. They're like, it's not accessible. I'm sorry. Accessibility is a process. No worries, no judgments. It's also, I'm assuming your website's probably more staff facing. Technically, the stuff that's more student facing needs to be accessible. And then obviously, everything else will follow suit, but don't worry. I know, I know. I feel like our team gets the bad rap of being like the accessibility police. I promise you we're not that tough. All right, folks. But I love what's happening in the chat. And it sounds like a lot of you are really weaving this work in. And that is so key. We want to make sure that we are weaving in the mindfulness, the SEL, and that it's a habit. It's not we don't want it to be a one-off. I think, and I think that sometimes you start the school year like, yeah, SEL. And then by this time in the year, that's when you're like, all right, wait, but I got to get to my teaching. Like, we got to get into the meat and potatoes of the content. And it's easy to push the SEL stuff to the wayside. But now more than ever, I think it's super important, right? We're heading into a really odd time right now. We have a presidential transition of power. We had some events happen in the Capitol a couple of weeks ago. I mean, so SEL cannot just be put on the back burner, right? We always need to keep it front and center. So how are we helping our students succeed? We've identified some buckets. So the first kind of bucket that we've talked about is consistency. And you guys know, because you're educators, students thrive off of consistency, right? That's why, having a regular routine and schedule, it works. It just works. So if you can develop a flow to your day and your school week, you're going to be in a good place. You also want to be consistent with where your resources and your teaching information lies, right? So if you're using something like Google Classroom, keep everything in the classroom, right? Have an organizational structure. If you go to the DIIT learning calendar, you'll see there's all sorts of PD around Google Classroom. So if you feel like you're not completely confident with Google Classroom, make some time to kind of review, but Google Classroom will absolutely keep you consistent. You can have drop times for assignments. So you can kind of set yourself up for success. You can kind of have it. A lot of the teachers that we support, they say things like, I plan on Friday. So on Friday, I get like everything for the following week. And then I schedule it so everything goes live Monday at 9 a.m. Right. And if that's the case, be transparent and tell your students like, hey, everything for the week will go live on Mondays at 9. Right. Communicate that. It shouldn't be a secret. It doesn't have to be something that like students are surprised by. That way they know like, oh, okay, Monday morning when I log into the classroom, I'm going to see everything, right? When it makes sense, have due dates, right? And then have a also a routine way of collecting assignments. So if you can do it on a regular basis too, that'll help. When you're kind of, creating due dates all over the place, students may get confused. You also are not their only teacher. Even at the elementary level, you may be you may have a classroom teacher, but then they have all their specials. So if you can be consistent with both the drop times and the due dates, that's going to help students manage the work they give to you. The other thing we want to consider is assigning students to pods. So, this can be especially helpful in thinking about like the students that they're going to collaborate with and work remotely with, right? So if I know like, all right, this is my small group in my virtual classroom, or this is my small group in my in-person classroom, that way they have the same sets of students. It also, from a practical standpoint, limits the number of students that they interact with, right? Especially for in-person learning, if we can kind of keep cross contamination and transmission at a low, right? But it also hits at that developing connections, right? If I'm trying to build these connections and I know like, hey, I'm always going to have like my core group of like 4 or 5 students that I'm always, checking in with, you're going to build a deeper connection, right? And especially, when this is hard this year, assigning pods will kind of help that happen a little bit more naturally. Couple of other buckets we've identified. And I talked about this before, but limiting the number of go-to tech tools, right? So, think through what are you going to use for screen recording? There's Screencastify, there's Loom, there's QuickTime, there's several others. I mean, pick one and stick with it, right? Like, and folks always love to ask us because we're DIIT, like, which one's the best one? Which is the best platform for this? We get what's the best one for video conferencing? The truth is, they're all pretty good. Like each one has their kind of, their pros and their cons. We're doing this today in Zoom, but is Zoom necessarily the best? No, we in fact do a lot of our training on Microsoft Teams, but we also use Meet for things. So, our approach is to be agnostic, but when it comes to which platform's the best, again, this is where you want to think school-wide. School-wide, what are you doing? Because if everyone's using Google Meet, don't be that one teacher who forces your kids to be on Zoom. Right? Like think about that. Like just stick with one if possible. That way students learn the platform better. And also think about your collaborative platforms, things like your Seesaw, Flipgrid, Nearpod, Pear Deck, all those other ed tech tools. You've got Edpuzzle, Padlet, Menti, right? Like what are you using? And kind of be strategic with it. If you're introducing a new tool every single week, imagine how overwhelming that can be for students. So, kind of think through what's going to make sense and then learn it and use it well. All right. Uh, Feedback is so important, right? And especially now, right? We want to really be providing targeted and meaningful feedback. So that also means possibly assigning fewer assignments so that your feedback is more meaningful. You also want to provide multiple opportunities for students to give you feedback on how your teaching can actually be better. So it could be that you're using the polling features. Pretty much all the video conferencing platforms have polling features. You could do a quick poll literally in the middle of your class. You can also do some assessment afterwards. So you could do like a form for after the class to say like, how's this going? How is your learning feeling? And this should be done for all grade levels. I don't want you thinking like, oh, that's great for the older kids, but what about the young kids? You're talking to a former elementary educator. I worked with some of my students were in pre-K. And a simple, how did this lesson feel for you? Like, how did your learning go? You could do thumbs up, thumbs sideways for like, and thumbs down. So, you should be checking in with students. It can be more involved, obviously, for your older students, but it can be a simple like thumb up, thumb sideways, thumbs down for some of your younger learners. And try and make your real-time meetings as engaging as possible so that you're not doing a whole lot of like talking at your students, but you're giving them time to either respond in the chat, do a Padlet, do a Menti, do something where they're doing something. It's not all you just talking and sharing a presentation. And then our last two buckets is one, communication, which so key, right? And not just communication to your students, but also think about the families, right? Especially for our younger students and our students that need more support, who are in D75. Keeping families informed is going to be key, right? We can't do this work without them. So making sure that those lines of communication remain open. You also want to make your expectations clear for students, right? What is it that you expect? And even though, again, we're kind of halfway through the year, now might be a good time to revisit, especially if you're noticing like participation has dropped off. Maybe kids aren't checking in as much, kind of doing a mid-year check-in like, hey guys, maybe we haven't reviewed the expectations for class in a little while. Let's do that right now. Let's kind of talk about those expectations again. And then remember, part of what the DOE proposed is building stamina across the school year. So we're now at almost the end of January. Are you building in that stamina? Are students maybe doing a little bit more synchronous time or a little bit more, work in your session, right? What does that look like? Because we should be building up. And then our last big bucket is that planning and preparation. And, this is so key to being successful. It's all about planning and preparing to teach in this remote and hybrid. So what are the lessons and the videos and the tools that you're going to need to make available to the families and your students so that they can also rewatch, right? Because we know, you're not going to do a lesson once and it's just going to stick, especially now. There's so many distractions happening at home. So what are the things that you're going to do to ensure that students can review a lesson? Do you record and then post? Or do you make tools available in your Google Classroom or whatever your LMS is? Do you make it available so that students can review asynchronously on their own? We also want to make sure that you're not assigning work to fill time or to keep kids online longer than necessary. That's not what this is about, right? We're not just making kids do busy work. In fact, no one has time for that. And I have yet, in all my years of teaching, ever actually heard a kid go, "Yeah, miss, give me more of those worksheets. I love those worksheets." I've never had it. That's typically not like what my kids like. If anything, it's things like, "Wait, can we do those scratch projects again? I love when we did the scratch projects. Can we do that? But can I do it this way? Can I make a project like this?" That's the stuff our kids love, is when they're actually making something with meaning, not doing busy work. So are you making sure to kind of build more of that in? And then being really intentional about what content is going to be synchronous and what will be asynchronous, and providing opportunities for both. I know that sometimes is more of an admin decision, but admins have been advised on this too, that you can't just replicate the school day. So you shouldn't be 100% synchronous, right? You're not just online all the time, just like with kids. You need to have that synchronous time, and you also need to have asynchronous time, and make use of things like office hours and, maybe small group and one-on-one check-ins. So we are going to get into Nearpod, and I'm going to just demo some things in Nearpod to show you one way that you can use a tool like Nearpod to make your teaching more engaging. Now, this is not, just to be really clear, this is not like a Nearpod PD. I do not work with Nearpod, but I've dabbled with it enough just to kind of show you some of the pieces that you can do with it. And I think, again, thinking through that engagement piece and making sure that our lessons are really fun for our students, that's going to be key. So I'm going to pop out of here and go into my Nearpod. So 1 second here. And here we go. So all of you are going to go to join.nearpod.com. And I see some folks in the chat saying they have to hop off. Listen, don't fret if you need to leave early. No big deal. You don't even have to say it in the chat. Don't worry about it.
We are recording.
Exactly. That's why we record. We know that some folks will have to drop off. No worries. And then you see I'm sharing this code. So it is LGU47. And then 1 second here. So I'm going to click X, but for those of you who have never kind of played around with Nearpod, even though I just kind of exited out of that, that little box that had the code always remains at the top. And I think this is just important to kind of call out to folks because you'll always have kids who join late, right? The kids who show up and they're like, I'm here, 15 minutes in, and you're like, uh-huh. So if you use something like Nearpod and they're kind of coming in late, look, the code is always at the top. So even though I'm going to advance to my slides, and here we go. We're going to start on this slide. So we're going to be using Nearpod. And just to kind of, again, be intentional, things like Nearpod, Pear Deck, and Smart Suite are applications that can be used both in person and remotely. They also work really well with Google. And for those of you who are using Google Classroom and who are on either the central G Suite or their school's G Suite, it plays nicely with the G Suite tools. So I love that. It's also got integrated language immersion, and there's a lot of tools within Nearpod to make it more interactive. And I think that's the big key, right? When we're doing our synchronous sessions, we want to build in as much activity as possible so that kids are doing things, right? So I see right now we have 8 students in. And if you're wondering how I can see that, down here at the bottom, I've got my student list. So if you have not joined, take a moment to join. Now I am using the free account. So I also want to be fully transparent because Nearpod is what we call a freemium. So it starts out free for a lot of the basic features. And then if you kind of want some of the more premium stuff, it does come with a price tag. I have never paid for the more premium side of things. I use free, and free works really well. Some limitations, though, just to be aware of. With the free one, you can't have more than 40 students on a Nearpod at the same time. So I remember doing this PD, and I think we had almost 100 people. And so after the 40th person joined, they were like, I got locked out. So it's the kind of thing that if you've got a really, really large group of students, anything past 40, you're not going to be able to use. But if you've got, anything under, you can use it with your students. All right. And then this is also something that, if your school has the budget, I know some schools have been able to purchase this for their teachers. Again, that's a school's decision. But, if it makes sense, a lot of schools who do it are very pleased with the purchase. So again, that's just something to kind of keep in mind. All right, but I'm going to advance and we're going to just go through some of these Nearpod activities. So what you're seeing on my screen, just to also be intentional, you're seeing on my screen the educator view, but all of you who have joined get the student view. So you can kind of toggle back and forth between your browsers if you kind of want to see the difference, because there are going to be differences. In fact, here is our first activity. So on your screen on the student side, you should see an activity that is prompting you to circle how you are feeling about hybrid teaching. And you have the option of circling as many things as you want. Now, what we're doing here is this is the draw feature. And I really love this because, again, so many tools don't adequately kind of keep our littlest ones engaged, particularly if our tools are very, word heavy or text heavy, they just exclude our really young students. But something like this makes it more accessible. You can add pictures, and then it's a matter of just like using your mouse or your stylus to, draw and respond. So this is something to get all your learners involved. And that's what I really love. So that's what we're going to do right now is we are kind of modeling the different activities within Nearpod you could use. So, and then as you're seeing, so on my screen, I've got the teacher end of it. So I can see who has submitted. I can also see who is in progress. So I hope it is okay. I'm going to, I can click on a particular student and I can actually see what they've submitted. So, I can see Lisa has circled 3 different emotions, right? And again, this is important to kind of know as well, because if you're sharing your screen, then this is something that everyone would be able to see. So also kind of be aware, depending on the activity, this may be something you wouldn't want to share because maybe your students have, shared it with the hopes that it was just for you. So just kind of keep it in mind. But this is one of the activities. I'm going to move us on in 2 seconds here. All right. So you now have a different activity. This is a fill in the blank. Oh, and Joanna, thank you so much for sharing that in the chat. I also hadn't done Nearpod asynchronously, so it's good to know that it caps at 125 for the asynchronous stuff. Again, it's always good to know, anytime you're using these, what I call freemium, like where's the limit, right? One of the freemium apps I love is Padlet, and Padlet, it's good to know that you can only have 3 Padlets at a time, right? But you can wipe it clean and then reuse. So always good to know what the limits are. All right. So again, just to be transparent, what you're seeing on my screen is the educator view. So I can see who has completed. I can also see their score results. I can also view the answers. So if you're wondering, for those folks who did not get a perfect score, it's typically, and I know why, it's typically because you switched students and kids. All right, so gonna go to the next activity. And we kind of did this a little bit, but I just want to model this for you. So we already kind of talked through some like challenges and hopes and fears. But what I like about this is that you are getting prompted to share your biggest challenge, and you're prompted to do so. If you wanted, you can record, which I find nice. Again, think through, the ways in which you're asking folks to participate, right? Some of our students, even, they may have the ability to respond via text, but some of them might not, right? Some of them might be better orally, right? They might be better with a drawing. So when you kind of think through, what's the best way for folks to participate, giving multiple ways is usually nice. All right. And then just something to be aware of in Nearpod as well, you can always get a post-session report. So that's what you're seeing on your screen right now. Data, so important, right? Especially when we're talking remote and hybrid and like, what are students doing and how do we kind of quantify that? How do we know if they're really engaged? Nearpod is one of those tools that's going to allow you to see kind of who's participating, and also if there are answers that you want to kind of code for accuracy, you can do that as well. So, with that other activity, I was able to see who responded and just how many they got correct and incorrect. So be aware that you can do that in Nearpod. You can also do some choice boards. And I would really encourage, anytime you're planning your sessions, think through, right, having multiple ways that an activity can look like. And we know that, that's differentiation, right? We want to make sure that we are keeping all of that in mind. So, think through what those activities could look like. And are there multiple ways for students to kind of hit at the underlying skills, right? Because it's all about the underlying skill. So, the way in which they get there, not necessarily the most important, right? So thinking through what those activities could look like, and also making some key decisions versus, what online options could look like and what are some offline options. And I would really, really encourage you to think about those offline activities. What are things students can do away from a device? Not just for when they're, not in person, but also just to give students a break. Remember, everyone is online now almost, 100% of the time. It's like kids are in front of a screen. So if you can build in some activities that take them away from a screen, even better, right? We want students like having some away from their screen, right? Not that screens are bad, but it's good to have some balance. Now, this is a Microsoft Sway. If you don't know what sways are, it's kind of like a cross between a website and a PowerPoint. Now, one of the reasons I really like sways is it comes to us from Microsoft, and Microsoft, when it comes to accessibility, really is leading the way. Google, they're getting there, but when it comes to accessibility, they're just not where Microsoft is. So I like Microsoft because it allows you to change the view. You can kind of see things differently just by scrolling and swiping. So this way, let me hold on here. I'm going to expand this way so that you can see it better. But this is kind of made to view in this horizontal method, but you could also change the view so that it's more vertical. And that's one of the accessibility features. You could also see an outline view as well. And because it's with Microsoft, Microsoft has that accessibility built in. So it's got some immersive reader, but I particularly like sways. And, it's like I said, if you've kind of played around with PowerPoint and you've played around with creating a site, it's a cross between the two. And this was one that Jeff Utz made. So just to give credit where credit is due, Jeff Utz actually helped us create this hybrid teaching class. So some of these resources and materials are ones that he directly put together and used with his middle school students. All right, screencast. So I talked a moment ago about kind of the different tools that are available, the different, I should say, platforms. You've got Screencastify, Loom, but really screencasts are a way in which you can do really short lessons, and you can do them asynchronously. So you can kind of record yourself, say, when you've got some downtime, it doesn't have to be live. You record yourself walking students through a particular lesson or a particular thing that you want them to do. You record it, and then you can share it out. We know that some of our educators do this to deliver a daily message or to kind of do a quick review of learning. You can even then put it back on students and have students make their own videos using a tool like Flipgrid. So videos like this, I think, are definitely something that if you're not incorporating already, you should, right? And particularly if you haven't been using Flipgrid is great. And then you can have a Flipgrid, you can have all your students in there, and then they start responding to each other. It's actually really, really cool. But then you're both kind of creating screencasts and delivering those short messages. So it's not just a one way where the teacher's delivering it, you then get students delivering it too. All right, so I'm now going to play a video for you. And you'll see if you're following along with my screen, on mine, it's giving me a prompt. Now I can have it so that the student plays, that means each one of you, if I selected student plays, each one of you would watch your own screen and watch the video that way. But if I click on teacher play, which is what I am going to do, then it's only going to play on my device. So if you're on your other tab following along, I'm going to ask that you come back to where I am so that you can watch this really, really quick video.
Videos are a good way to engage kids. They could go back and rewind them and review what they missed. You can also add questions in the middle using Edpuzzle, Nearpod, and other tools. Another thing you could do is you could add funny sounds that also engages the kids.
So hopefully you're using some fun tools like your videos. And like Jeff said, he was the one narrating that quick video, making use of things like, uh, like little noises. I mean, you heard a flushing toilet, be funny. We're big proponents that like this work isn't easy and teaching in this kind of setting isn't always easy. So you got to have a little fun, right? Don't feel like, like you can't make your teaching and your learning fun. In fact, I think it's possibly the one thing that might be missing, right? When we do all this work. So make things that you're doing with your students fun and engaging. The more fun they are, the more likely they're going to check in, right? We know that for so many of our kids, they're starting to get to that point where they're checking out, right? They're like, "Ugh, I don't want to do remote learning today. I don't feel like it. I don't want to do it." But if they know like, but my teacher keeps it so much fun, or like going to library class, like we do the coolest projects. We get to do all this fun stuff. That's very motivating, right? So don't forget to infuse a little bit of fun. All right, so right now you're seeing another activity on your screen. It's a matching activity, so you've got to match the tiles with each other. So I'll give you a few moments to kind of do some of that. And again, this is a great activity that can be used in a lot of different ways. You can bring it down for your youngest students and maybe do like some letter and picture matching. You can do shapes. You can do all sorts of vocabulary work. But this is another great way to get students engaged and involved. So I'll give you guys a few more moments to tinker with this. Give folks another few moments here. And again, I'm kind of breezing through some of these activities. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do all these activities at once necessarily in one whole Nearpod with students. Kind of be intentional and obviously give them time. But just for the sake of showing you what's available, I'm going a little quicker. Just to be intentional with you all. I wouldn't want you thinking this is the pace you should use with your students. All right, so I'm going to go to the next activity. It is okay if you're not done. All right, so these 8 pieces of advice were things that actual students kind of wanted teachers to know. So I thought I'd pass it along to you, and you are welcome to pop into the chat some things that you've tried or you're currently doing and how it's working. So students have said on numerous occasions that small groups rock, particularly the breakout rooms. And I think that, one of the reasons is that it provides a smaller space, right, for students to try and connect with each other. Remember what I also said about like one of the ways to ensure success is to kind of create like that student pod. So, if you're being consistent with the small groups too, that can be helpful. And so definitely kind of think through, are you making use of those small groups? Classroom participation is key, right? We know that. We know that we want to get students participating. So they want to participate. Are you now building that in? Um, you also want to make sure that students are comfortable asking questions, right? Do students have a way of doing it? Have you prompted them to use the chat? Have you prompted them to kind of make sure that, if you want them doing it in a form or in the stream, that they know, right? Again, all about communicating those expectations. One-on-one meetings and office hours are also great. Students really love those. Connect with students and encourage students to connect with you. So it doesn't always have to be that you're scheduling all of the meetings. You can make it so that, like, hey, there's open office hours. You can come in, right? You want to try and get students to form connections with other adults. So, bring in the other adults into your building. It's not always just teachers. Remember, you've got school aides, you've got your guidance counselors, you've got other folks in the building who may not directly work with students, but who can help support, right? Think about like parent coordinators, even the school psychologist, the social worker, right? These are all folks to kind of tap on. You also want to provide kids with breaks, things like Kahoots and Scribbles, treasure hunts. But again, make time to literally just look away from the screen, right? Like, I don't think we do that enough. And then don't forget, ask your students what they like and want, right? What's helpful for you? What do you want to see in the class? Getting that input from students, super important. And then some SEL connections. I'm going to breeze through this because we have really talked a lot about SEL, but making sure that you're incorporating it, that you've got some positive routines that you're incorporating. Think through how this is part of your curriculum. Are you building in those daily and weekly check-ins? Are you building in time for you to get to know the kids, for the kids to get to know you, and for the students to get to know each other? And then remember, be vulnerable, right? It's okay to fail. It's okay if you make mistakes. In fact, making mistakes in front of them, I would say, is actually something you need to do. It's okay. We need to normalize the struggle. We need to normalize making mistakes. Everyone has had tech glitches. Let's be real. All right. So, in summary, we know that with hybrid learning, students can have positive relationships. All right. It takes a little bit more work, but it can happen. And we also know that we need to make sure that our teachers are having positive relationships with their colleagues as well. So that's part of it. We need to build that up. We also know that you can have productive engagement and learning at home as well as in the classroom. Again, takes a little bit more work and effort, but it can happen, right? If we're properly planning and preparing. We also know that we need to address those social emotional learning needs based on our students and the class. We know that learning is occurring at the same pace as our in-person learners, so pacing is always super important. We want to make sure that we are addressing that seamless transition, particularly as buildings close and open based on positivity rates and cases, and that we are effectively using and choosing the tools for our both in-person and remote teaching and learning. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open it up to some questions. I know some folks are also asking about CTLE. We will provide that to you in just a moment. Don't worry, you're going to get credit for this. But I want to give folks an opportunity. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. And I don't see any hands, but sometimes folks you got to give the wait time, right? Wait time is key, especially in the remote setting.
And sometimes people just need a moment to process. Whenever you ask people things, I mean, generally it's after a lot of presentation. So I find you have to give people a minute.
Agreed. Even more wait time than what you would do in person.
It's true, because at least in person, you have body language to work off of.
Exactly.
You can see that kid that's like, I want to ask something, but I don't know how to say it.
I know, right? You literally see like the wheels spinning in their little heads. Not so much in the virtual world. All right. But just because I know some folks do have to go, Latiqua has gone ahead and put the link for attendance. So this is what starts the CTLE process. So let me be very intentional about explaining how this works. You are going to click on the link. In fact, I'm going to click on it right now so that we go there together. So it's a Google form. You'll fill out all your pertinent details. All right. And then this session is called Lit. I should say Lit Series, a partnership of librarians and instructional technologists. So that is the session you are picking. This is a 75-minute session. We're giving you credit for the full hour and 15 minutes. So go ahead and pick 75 minutes. And then what will happen is after today, most likely, if not at the very end of today, first thing tomorrow morning, you're going to get an email from our digital accessibility email. In that email will be a link to a Survey Gizmo survey. Take the survey, give us real feedback. We absolutely look at all our feedback and we use it to tweak our classes. We are constantly making our classes better. So be real with us. Tell us, where we could be doing a whole lot better. And then if you need CTLE within that Survey Gizmo survey, it'll prompt you, fill it out. There's a few other pieces for CTLE, it's like the last 4 of your social, that kind of stuff. So fill it in and then it'll get directly emailed to you. That's the beautiful thing. It's all in Survey Gizmo. All right. Oh, and I see a question from Kathleen. Okay. Ooh, okay. So platform suggestions for student edited websites or blogs for student council/green team. I think you're going to want to come, Kathleen, I don't know what grades you support, but I think you're going to want to come on Thursday because Wix Education is doing a phenomenal PD that's going to show you their platform for teaching students how to create websites. And if it sounds like that's what you want students to be doing anyway, I think you're going to want to attend on Thursday. So that link is going to be in our, we just have to post in our learning calendar. So like literally within an hour. It's already on Michael's, so there you go. But I would highly recommend coming to that session because they're going to show you Wix. But you could technically take what you learn in Wix and I'm sure transfer it over to Google Sites. I'm very big on like being agnostic when it comes to platform, but I think if you're looking especially for some like content and curriculum on how to actually, do web design, I think you're going to want to see what they have.
Flexibility in how to approach technology helps kids as all the platforms continue changing as they grow and get older. Because that what's going to be popular a couple of years from now is not what's in existence today. So keeping kids rotating platforms and just being focused on principles and skills keeps them flexible in their thinking and not overwhelmed when they come up against a new technology.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Honestly, like we have to really promote that whole, being agnostic. I'm, and you've probably, maybe this sounds like mixed messaging. You want to kind of be consistent with some of the major tools you're using, but at the same time, you do want to introduce new stuff, be strategic with it. But yeah, remind kids like what's, in fashion right now, especially when it comes to technology, goes out of fashion very quickly, right? Technology is constantly changing. So kind of be prepared for, things will shift.
Okay, so Laura, do you want me to send out a survey just on topics for next week? Or
yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, so I will do that after this. We're going to do a follow-up call after this with our teams, but we'll send that out to all of you. I have all of your email addresses.
And also, Michael, I was thinking that could go in our follow-up email as well.
Yeah.
That we sent, so we could collaborate on that.
Absolutely.
All right. So folks, I just want to say thank you so much for coming to this first kind of kickoff. This is not a one and done type of session. Again, these are going to be weekly PDs that we host in conjunction with library services. look out for that email. We're going to give not only the link for CTLE, but in that follow-up, we'll give a survey, because this is about you guys. We want to hear from you. We want to know what is going to help you be the very best librarian to your students, and how you can be supporting what you're already doing. So look out for that. Because our next few sessions that we plan are going to be based upon the needs that you all identify. But again, thank you all for showing up. We had quite the crowd, and I get the feeling that this is only going to grow. So hopefully you liked what you saw today in our first session. Feel free to share this out with your fellow educators, not just librarians. Obviously, we're kind of doing this in conjunction with library services to target our librarians. But as you're kind of seeing from some of what we presented today, this benefits pretty much any teacher right now. So, if you've got a colleague that you want to kind of rope into this, feel free, send them the link, let them know that this is happening. We don't discriminate. We're very much of like, the more the merrier, fill the Zoom room, so to speak. So please feel free, pass this along, and hopefully I will see all of you here next week, same time.
Okay, thank you everyone. I'm going to stop recording.